Good afternoon and welcome to the February 13th meeting of the City Plan Commission. My name is Margaret Livingston, Chair of the Commission. I call this meeting to order at 1:32. We will have, let's see, I guess I don't have my glasses, so this might be a little buggy. Thank you. Oh, nice. Call to the public. This time is reserved for members of the public who would like to address the City Plan Commission on any items that are not on the City Plan Commission agenda and that are within the jurisdiction of the City Plan Commission. No action shall be taken. A sign-up form was available outside City Council chambers for those who wish to sign up. On the day of the meeting, request to speak must be received by 1:30 p.m. on the date of the meeting. We did not have any requests to speak, so we will go ahead and see if there's any changes to the agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Raul Garcia, Plan Inspections. There was one change to item number 4, the replat, the portion of that presentation in regards to replats. That section of the presentation will be postponed to our next meeting, which will be next week, February 20th.
Okay.
And that is the only change.
Can we get a motion to accept that?
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Today is our annual business meeting, and so our first item is to turn my phone off. Our second item is the CPC business items, the election of officers. There will be a nomination for chair, first chair, and second chair.
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Margaret Livingston for chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I tried.
I'd like to nominate Senior Cummings for first vice chair.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'd like to nominate Mr. Trimble for second chair.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go. Item number B is changes to the bylaws.
Kevin Smith, Plans and Inspections. This is just an opportunity, if there's an item on the bylaws you'd like to modify or change, this is an opportunity to do so. We have none proposed at this time.
Okay. So do we have to motion on anything? No, because there's nothing. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, which is Park Fees Special Fund Report, Parks and Recreation Department. Gloria Venzor, Project Manager, Parks and Recreation Department.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
My name is Gloria Venzor. I'm the Parks Planning and Development Manager.
Is that on?
I got a promotion, so I'm not a project manager anymore.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm gonna present to you the annual Parkland Dedication Report. So, so we're following the strategic plan goal number 3, promote the visual image of El Paso. Number 4, enhance El Paso's quality of life through recreational, cultural, and educational environments. Number 7, enhance and sustain El Paso's infrastructure network. Sorry. So the Parkland Dedication Ordinance was established in 1989, and it was established for the developers to dedicate at least 1 acre of land per 100 single-family units or 200 multifamily units. If the land is less than 1 acre, the developer will pay cash to the city on the amount of $1,300 per single family units or $645 per family unit. The parkland dedication shall follow the park design and construction standards. So the city is divided in 5 zones: northwest, Mission Valley, central, east, and northeast, and also divided on 48 park zones. So on 2018, we received 5.31 acres, and in 2019, 4.61 acres of land. So one of the parks that was added to the park system is that Dawn View at Horizon Park on District 5 with 1.56 acres. And the other one is Vivid Dreams Park on District 5 with 3.05 acres. So right now, parks under construction at 95% complete. We have Cimarron Sage number 2 Packet Park, Cimarron Sage number 2 Park, Enchanted Hills number 1 Trail, Enchanted Hills number 2 Trail, Enchanted Hills number 3 Main Park, Rio Valley Central Park, Rio Valley subdivision, Rio Valley North Exercise Trail, Rio Valley North Pocket Park Trail, Rio Valley South Pocket Park Trail, Rio Valley Esperanza Pocket Park Trail, High Desert Park, Mesa Vista Park, Adam Sage Park and Open Space. All these on District 1. And on District 5, we have Holy Spring Lineal Park. And on District 8, Montecillo number 4. The cash the city received in 2018 was $323,000, 380, and in 2019, 215,364. So, cash received I'm gonna tell you amounts we have received since 1989. So on Northwest Park Zone, total received $2.6 million, total allocated $2.4 million, total unallocated $101,000. In Central Park Zone, total received $578,000, total allocated $572,000, and total unallocated $6,000.
I have a question.
Sure.
Actually, I have two questions. Going back to how many acres we've received in parks, is that typical? Is that about the
Yes,
average
sometime-
annually?
Sometimes the city receive 4 parks, sometimes 2 or 3, but yes, it's
That's about typical?
Mhm, it's
Because it
typical.
feels like we've approved a lot of subdivisions, and that, it seems like a very low number to me, that's the only acreage that we have received in
Mhm.
parks.
Yes, ma'am. We have so
And-
many projects right now under construction.
So it's just, okay, so that's what the difference is, okay.
Yes.
And then the unallocated money, so it just sits there, or what
No, we are
happens?
working with that money, and I'm gonna show you the projects we
Okay,
have worked on.
got it, thank you.
Sure. So in Mission Valley Park Zone, we have received 1 million, and total allocated 919,000, and total unallocated 81,000. And East Park Zones, 2.7 million, total allocated 2.6 million, and total unallocated $239,000. Northeast, total received 1.8 million, total allocated 1.7 million, and total unallocated $99,000. So we have a program that is the proportionality program, where funds are disbursed based on proportionality of basic amenities to provide to the parks, such as canopy over playgrounds, swings, covered picnic tables, benches, trash receptacles, bike racks, trees with drip irrigation, and for safety, cameras, fencing, etc. So on 2019, we complete the project Suffolk Park, and we install a new playground, Rocco containment, and a ramp. This was done on District number 3. For District number 5, we complete the project of Brisa del Este Park, a new playground and swings, Rocco containment and ramp, and a concrete pathway to connect to the existing sidewalk. Here is Brisa del Este. So this is an example of the gap analysis that we prepared to identify which parks are in need of basic improvements. So in this case, this is an area of District 5. So we identified that we have several parks with playgrounds with small canopies integrated to the same playground. but we identify other parks with playgrounds with no canopy. So one of them is a Spanish Castle Park. So the park selected to be improved in 2020, we have on District 1, Incado Park with a new playground with rockall enclosure. District 4, Colonia Verde Park, new canopy over existing playground. And District number 5, Spanish Castle Park, new canopy over existing playground. Any questions or comments?
How do you decide which park gets attention next? Is there some
Yes,
system
so
or-
as I mentioned before, we prepare a gap analysis study.
still like that? You
Mhm.
just showed us.
Yes.
Annually?
I'm sorry?
That gets done every year?
Yes.
Updated every year? Okay. Just curious. Or if
Yes,
you
of
just
course.
kind of throw a dart and say, we'll do this one next.
No, we prepare an analysis study, and then also we receive several complaints from the public.
Oh, yeah. I bet. Okay, thank you.
Any other
Anyone else?
questions?
Chris?
I have a question. Do you update the requirements, the dedication and requirements often, or how do you assess that very often? Do you compare it to other cities?
Yes, so I think the first ordinance didn't include any playgrounds or canopies or anything. It was just the irrigation system, grading, and sod. But now, because the ordinance have changed every time, so now we ask the developers to include a playground with a canopy and some picnic tables. So now we have more improvements on the new parks.
I'm just wondering if it's equitable with other cities of our size to, our acreage and our
So as I understand, in reality, other cities, they don't have anything. So I think we are one of the cities that really have this program, this ordinance, and I think it's something very good for us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Gloria, how are zones defined? I notice you have different zones. What defines a zone?
I don't know exactly, I don't have, but I can investigate and I can send you the response on that one.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
Anyone else? No? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you.
Item number 3 would be the 2019 Activity Report, Planning Division. Harrison, and then Ann, and then Nelson, right? Or is it Mr. Atue?
Madam Chair, not too fast. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. How are you? Happy New Year to those of you I haven't seen. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you for all your dedication coming to this meeting every 2 weeks, and also your support of planning matters and of staff. As you know, we brought so many items before you for the last 18 months or 19 months or 24 months since I've been here. And you've done an excellent job. We also want to thank the legal department also for keeping us in check. As we present this information to you today, I want you to have an open mind, look at the information more objectively. And in terms of being objective, I also want you to start looking at how do you want the city to develop. Several occasions we brought cases before you, and I know Chris has had questions about some of the planning principle behind that. Some of those are things that we want you guys to start thinking of when you look at cases, not just move to approve, but ask those tough questions and let us make sure that we serve you and the community that you serve more objectively. Okay. I know some of you have met some of our staff, but I don't know that you've met, some of the leaders of this planning and inspection department. You've seen Kevin, also known as Hot Tamale, several times. But I don't know, as some of you may have dealt with Tony De La Cruz. Tony, Kevin is in charge of planning. You know, as you know, we have planning and inspections. So the inspection portion of it is led by Tony and his staff. So Tony has more of our staff. We have about 104, 105, staff members, and Tony has the majority of that. And that's also including land development as part of that inspection as well. And we also have another section, which is the Historic Landmark Commission and Provi. Some of you may have seen Provi come before you. And we also have some new young staff as well. And as you can see, most of our staff are very young, very energetic, very innovative, and very creative. So I would say for those new staff, stand up, please. Okay, so we have 2 new staff that started. You started 2 weeks ago? Monday. And you started
Oh, boy.
Monday. Okay.
You're
So
like
these are
fresh,
two of,
fresh new.
Yes. So these are 2 of our newer staff, and this is just the planning, section. If I brought everybody in here, this place would be packed. But I wanted to say thank you, for all you guys do, and thank you for, trying to build a sustainable city, as you do all the stuff that you do. Today, we're going to be presenting all the things that we've been doing for the past year, and also to solicit from you some kind of feedback as to what you would like to see in terms of planning, the city, and also the recommendations you want to give to us, to pass on to City Council on your behalf. Okay, so again, thank you. And I may have gotten myself in trouble because the boss lady is here as well. So we can't do anything without the boss lady, so thank you. And thank you, staff and legal department as well.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and
Hot tamale. I've got to know.
I'll get Philip back sometime.
Okay.
So Kevin Smith with Planning Inspections. Again, as Philip mentioned, it's our privilege to present to you our annual report for 2019. And as Philip mentioned, as we go through this, we want you to have an open mind. We're going to present some data that historically we've done in the past, and which we think is good, but it doesn't tell the full story. So we're going to tell also about some observations we made, some of the ones we've noticed as staff, but some of the ones we know you have mentioned as well as members of the City Plan Commission. And so we wanted to have a discussion. And as Philip mentioned, we'll be presenting some recommendations for you to consider to pass on to City Council in terms of how we want to see El Paso develop. So to go over the presentation, I will start out, go over a few slides. I will turn it out over to our Historic Preservation Officer, Provi Velasquez, and then who will then turn it over to Ann Gallante, who is our zoning lead planner, who will then pass it on to our subdivision lead planner, Nelson Ortiz. And then finally, it'll be Harrison Pleward, who oversees our long-range section, who will finish up the presentation. So I think, and I've told my staff this, and I've told others, that for our department, and I think you guys, for you all as members of the City Plan Commission, we have an important role how we shape our community. I think our work is very influential because we influence how we live, how we work, and how we play here in El Paso. And I think we're doing good, but I think we could do better. So I'm looking real quick at our zoning applications that were processed. Many applications, we have had 770, and this is just by zoning applications last year. So 770 applications. You see the 5 categories to the right of that bar chart. Those are all ones that have some form of public process, whether they go through City Plan Commission, to City Council, or to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. The 2 on the right, the legal nonconforming and zoning verification, are a lot of the work that we go, that are behind the scenes, that a lot of our staff process on a daily basis. This also, as we go through this and in the subdivision cases, this also does not include all the meetings we have, all the phone calls we take, all the discussions we have, both internally and externally, to try and move, try to help development move forward. And again, this is the subdivision cases. A lot of them are the 5-day and the planning determinations. And the 5 days, for those who may not be aware, that's an opportunity for a developer to provide an initial submission to the city, and for different select departments to provide initial feedback on their proposal. And so, again, as you all are aware, you are the final authority on subdivision cases. But a lot of the other projects before they even get to you have to go through these processes. We often meet and have tireless conversations to try and, again, as I mentioned, to move development forward. Also, generally, over 2019, we've had numerous enhancements both to our policies and our processes. There were numerous code amendments that took place due to the legislative session last year, and they went through City Plan Commission and City Council and were approved mid last year. And we were able to work with our legal team to get our codes amended to be in conformance with the state. We've also been working with our scooter program, the Shared Mobility Program, which is a pilot program where we evaluate the scooter impact here in El Paso. Right now, it's primarily downtown and what we've termed uptown, up towards UTEP, which are the boundaries of where scooters can deploy. And we have 3 providers, and our pilot program just was approved to be extended by City Council by an additional year, so we can gain additional feedback and data to see how they function here within the city. We've also had numerous customer service updates or improvements along the way as well. Many of which are enhanced, are done to enhance and improve our service of what we provide to the public. I don't think he's here. Mariano Soto, who is our GIS guru, he's the one that really helps us out with a lot of our maps, both internally that we present to you all on every time we meet, but also for the public as well, what they're able to see, what type of information we're able to provide to the public. We also have a weekly internal meeting to identify development problems with cases, whether it's in our shop or with our building permit side of the house, to identify those issues and how we can overcome them, to identify solutions to move the projects forward. The Developers Focus Group is something we hold every month, again, where we meet with the development community, and overall they see trends and problems with development, and we identify the issues and find solutions. And thus far we've had improvements with organizations such as TxDOT, El Paso Electric, our Streets and Maintenance Department, and we're working with El Paso Water right now. And there are many more things we can improve upon, and we're eager to continue to have those conversations. As well as one of the other initiatives that we've been undertaking, which assists with our customer service, we have mandatory pre-application and pre-submittal meetings. That, again, gives us, similar to the 5 days, but it gives us an opportunity to comment on a proposed development and to give guidance to a proposed developer. And those are just some select areas where we look at improving our customer service, and we're continuously looking at improving our customer service and how we provide better customer service to the public.
If I could, Kevin,
Please.
if I could make one comment about the Developers Focus Group, I think it would be great that if everyone that sits on this board would attend at least one meeting just to see how great those meetings are, and really how they've made the development community is super happy, and they're all I get all sorts of comments made to me about how productive they are and how they're actually seeing things change and get fixed. And I think it would be great for everyone to get to go to one and see, because it's kind of cool.
We can
to see
arrange that.
Everyone that's really moving and shaking and doing anything attends those meetings, and I think it would be very interesting and productive for for all of us to see the other side, you know, before and engage in those or listen to the conversations that go on before it hits us as this commission.
Yeah,
Just-
Madam Chair, I
just
mean,
my-
that's a great idea, and I know you've attended a number of them.
I have.
Many of them. And again, it's identifying those little issues that they come up across, sometimes very large issues, and see what can be done to improve the process or improve the delivery of a given component of development.
Well, also too, I think it'll help everyone to see how much really goes into the back work that goes into everything before it hits here. Once it hits here, you know, all the sweating and pulling and pushing is done. And really, I think the general member up here doesn't really know the hurdles that projects go through and how much work and effort goes into, on staff's part, goes into trying to help the customer, right, their customers, get their projects done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be great
And we could
really
definitely
for
work
everyone
with-
to attend.
We can definitely work with the members. I'll just advise, you know, we have to make sure we don't have,
Right.
we have
Well,
forum.
at different times.
Yeah,
At
different times,
meetings
but
have
we can-
different. Yeah, I know we can't all go at the same time, but
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful for everyone just to get to see, because you don't realize. I mean, I realize because I've attended, but you don't realize how much the staff has to go through to get, you know, to get the projects done. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Thank you. And to your point as well, from a staff standpoint, we've heard it and we've also seen it ourselves where our own organizations are benefited by the feedback that we're getting as well. How we see a process that's been in place for years. We don't notice that maybe it may be broken, but working with the development community, we're able to identify those broken areas or those damaged areas and repair those and fix them and make them better and even worse, so that we provide better service, so that we're not holding someone up as they try and get
Right.
a project going.
And also too, you know, from the developer's perspective, you know, from the customer's perspective, what those meetings are a safe place to get to say what they really want to say without feeling like, well, if I, you know, speak up or if I complain about this thing, I'm going to get retaliated against, which does not happen anyway. But that's, you know, I think that those meetings have assisted in sort of diminishing that attitude or, you know, false. I mean, it is very false that happens, but, you know, they feel like it's so nice to get to actually say, hey, why in the world, you know, are we having, why can't we X, Y, Z without feeling like, well, God, if I, you know, speak up, my project's gonna be delayed because I'm being a pain.
Yeah.
You know, so that's been commented to me, multiple times.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Thank you.
that's been extremely,
If I may comment on that as well.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that, and not only that, I think it should be a small, there should be a little training for all new members, maybe a day where you can take them around and show them what's done, all the different departments, because some of us that are in real estate kind of get it, but some people might not have an idea when they're up here. So, I mean, if you can teach them the different departments, that would help a lot, and what goes on the back.
Thank you. I mean, and you
without
know,
being disruptive, obviously.
yeah, no, and
for
you
you
know,
all.
for me and also working with our staff here in planning is we're always looking to how can we improve our service to the community. We're not perfect, but we want to strive to be perfect. But we have work to do, and so we're open to those points of, if you want to call it, constructive criticism, and address them. We will, but we've come a long way, and we're excited to keep working with our development community.
When are those meetings?
They're typically the last Wednesday,
Once a month.
last Wednesday of the month, and they're usually in the morning, starting, I believe, 9 or 9:30. We can coordinate schedules so that we can invite.
Just coming from a guy that feels like he wasn't invited to the cool kids party.
That's-
Never even heard of it. I didn't even
That's
know that
probably
happened.
my fault. I'll take responsibility. I didn't include you on the list.
I think you'll laugh.
I left.
Thank you.
But, yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. One of the things that we'll want to start doing is when we have a new commission member, appointed would like to do an orientation, and I know that has been something that we haven't done successfully, but it's not too late, to do orientation for each and every one of you, so you can see exactly what we do and how we do it. I agree with Mr. Garcia. That's something that we can certainly arrange. If you have time, we can bring you to the planning department and walk you through what we do, and show you some of the products that we've produced in terms of zoning codes or subdivision projects. So at least it gives you a better understanding of what planning is all about. And I know we haven't done a real good job of doing the orientation. We just bring you, we'll sit you down, and you go for it.
Throw us in the fire?
Yeah, we definitely, that's not how we want to do business, so we are going to evolve, and we're going to be better. Again, I know you guys have been doing this for for a year or two, and it's an open invitation. If you still want the orientation, we'll be glad to sit down with you so we can orient you to planning matters. In terms of the developers focus group, I agree with the chair, Madam Chair. I think it's a good thing for you to attend. We have somebody from the real estate group that attends on a regular basis. I think it's I forgot his name. It's a representative of the association, so he's there.
Of the Board of Realtors?
Yes, he's there. The one thing that we don't want is to have 4 or 5 of you show up and then we have a quorum. This is a meeting that is not advertised. Yes, if you're on the list, we do send it to you so that you can show up. Again, it's mostly for developers and real estate folks are welcome. Contractors are welcome. Engineers and architects are also welcome to the meeting. So if you want to show up, just let us know. We'll invite you to come and at least participate for that one time.
I didn't mean to open a can of worms, but it just came to me, and it was just
It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Yeah, good.
I
and
agree with
helpful
you.
to understand, because there's a lot of heavy lifting that goes into the product that comes to us.
Correct.
It's all clean and pretty, and everyone that gets it here is
Yeah, I totally agree
grateful
with
it's
you.
over. But
I think it's a good thing, for you to come and listen to some of. Most of the things that you guys approve here actually, affects what they do on the back end. So if you want to come, participate and ask questions of staff. As we go forward, I think Kevin mentioned the TxDOT, Paso Electric, now Paso Water. So now we're going to CID, capital improvement, and they will be there. School district also will be there, to talk about disposing of some of their properties that they have. So,
nice.
okay,
That's this coming meeting?
that's just coming on the 26th.
So who gets to go to the next one? Can you do a rotation of invitations or something?
I think it's open, but again, I just don't want 4 of you showing up. Then we have a quorum that we have to post. I just, 2 of you show up. I think it's good, and I'll defer to legal. But I think with 4 of you or 5 of you present, then we have it becomes a quorum. It becomes a meeting. That we can run afoul of the law because it's not advertised. Okay.
So, maybe you can coordinate the next 2 or.
Just send me an email, or Elsa, if you want to show up, we'll send you the invite, the time and the date. It's in City 3 building in the basement.
Behind dark doors. I'm just kidding.
Well, I know Chris wants to go, and
Yeah.
I want to go, and you want to go.
I will not go, so someone else can get to go, because I've been to several. Yep. I just think it would be helpful.
Why don't send out the invite, first 3 to respond, and then cut it off for that time, and then the next time say, okay, if you haven't gone yet.
Right.
First
Right.
3 respond, okay.
Philip can handle it
That's
however he
fine.
wants.
We'll do it individually. I think I don't want to send a mass email because
Yeah.
then we have to
I think you can send the email out, but don't respond as a group. Just respond individually.
Right.
Don't respond to all.
Okay.
BCC us.
Okay, we can do that. Yeah, it's. I mean, the meeting is not very long. Sometime we are there by, in an hour.
It's about an hour.
Yeah, but it's very productive. Very productive meeting.
It's been super productive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip.
Thanks.
Sorry
You're good, you're good.
to derail you.
That actually completes my portion of the presentation. Before I pass it over to Provi to cover the historic preservation portion, I just want to thank you all for taking the time, as Philip mentioned, take time out of your schedule as you have an interest in improving our city. We're grateful for you taking time out of your schedules to be here all the time. And again, I want to thank the staff that we get to work with on a daily basis. We have some great staff here, many of whom are present today, and then we also get the opportunity to work with other departments as we all strive to improve our city. With that, I'll turn it over to Provi to cover the historic preservation portion of this.
Thank you, Hot Tamale.
What have you done?
Never gonna live that down.
Good afternoon. My name is Providencia Velasquez. I'm the Historic Preservation Officer for the city.
Hello.
This is a brief overview of what we do at the city. Basically, every year we average about 250 applications. That includes certificates of appropriateness to go to the Historic Landmark Commission and administrative reviews that come to our office. And that doesn't include things that we basically advise property owners about and things like that. We're kept very busy. We do train planning staff on preservation principles and proposals so that everyone's updated and sort of familiar with what we do. We are updating the Downtown Historic District map because that's long overdue. There have been many changes since 1992. We'd like to have that updated as well. We approve new construction every so often, including the Visitor Center building renovation downtown, the Memorial Park Library addition, the Mill Street and Pioneer Plaza street improvements, which are also in the Downtown Historic District. The State Historic Preservation Office has recognized us as a certified local government in good standing for several years in a row now. And City Council has approved two tax exemption applications for historic properties. So said we're kind of busy. Do you have any questions?
Do you ever have anything to bring before us, or it's all handled administratively or otherwise in other committees? There's nothing that we have any purview in that?
No, the bulk of what we do handle administratively. I'd say about 75% of the applications that come in, we handle in the office. We would come to you for things like designations, which happen very, very rarely. Sometimes there's been a de-designation. I know you saw that a few years ago of a property right near Sunset Heights. Exactly.
Parking lot, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's rare that we come here, but yeah, I'd say we average visit to you every few years.
And to go along with that, a preview is in the next probably few months, we'll be bringing to you some code revisions. Provi's been working with the HLC and with the community to revise some portions of our code, which actually fall under Title 20, but they're mostly meant to improve and streamline the process, clear up some discrepancies in the code, and be more in line with some of our other codes. So you'll be seeing that probably in the coming months as we work, we finalize that. So that'll be something that'll be coming to you all in the near future.
I am curious, did they actually do the parking lot with the stones, like?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's still under construction.
If we're talking about El
Is it
Paso
really?
Community College,
Yes.
Yeah.
they destroyed yet another prohibited item again. And last time it was an entire structure, and this time it was what was left of that structure. So no, they did not do what
They
said they were
didn't?
going to do, nor what they were dictated to.
And that can't, and that's just can't be fixed?
No, of course not.
Wow, so they didn't
Way to go,
reuse those stones or anything?
No, most of them are gone now. But I would say, having been on HLC for a couple of years, that the beautiful thing about growth is the things that we see. The really difficult thing is the threatening nature in a lot of cases to historic properties, especially in the city core, but even in the periphery. And so Provy and her staff has done an outstanding job, and I would give kudos to her and her entire staff for what they do day in and day out, because there are properties that would not be here today if it weren't for them. And unfortunately, you can't save them all, but you can sure as hell try. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we
very
try.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So if no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
I'm good. We're good.
I saw that building. I just
Good afternoon, Chair and
saw that.
Commissioners. Ann Gayonte, Planning and Inspections.
That for Chihuahua.
So we're going to look at a few maps and some statistics and a couple of case studies to examine some of the trends that we have noticed with the applications and the projects that have come in as they relate to zoning. So this map shows the location of zoning relief requested to allow for the adaptive reuse and incremental growth in established neighborhoods. This includes administrative relief like legal nonconforming registrations for setback encroachments and reductions in required parking, as well as requests granted by the Zoning Board of Adjustments, and also rezonings to higher intensity districts or special permits for parking and setback relief. So this is a heat map. The greatest concentrations of requests are shown in yellow, with the lowest in blue. The largest clusters of relief requests have occurred in central El Paso and also in the Isleta area, which are some of our oldest areas. So of the 35 total rezoning cases heard by City Plan Commission and City Council last year, 20% were requests to go from single-family residential to a higher density residential district. And the majority of these requests were in existing neighborhoods that were in transition. We had 11 special permit cases heard by City Plan Commission and City Council in 2019, and 27% of these were requests for relief associated with infill development. So this includes requests for parking reductions and or relief from required setbacks to allow for the adaptive reuse of existing buildings or the maximization of vacant lots in older neighborhoods. So we're going to look separately now at the setback relief versus the parking relief. This map shows the requests for relief from the required setbacks. So these are cases heard in 2019, and this is another heat map showing the greatest concentration of uses, pretty similar to what we saw on the last slide for requests overall. So the remedies here include legal nonconforming registration of existing buildings that don't meet current code, ZBA special exception requests for in existence 15 years or more, not established by the current owner, or there are already more than 2 lots in the same block that don't conform with the same requirement. So those particular types of ZBA requests. Also, requests for special permits that had to do with setback reductions. So again, the clustering here pretty closely matches with the first map that we saw. This is a map isolating the requested relief from parking requirements. So what's really interesting to note here is that this is almost entirely clustered around the center of El Paso. And what's pretty interesting about this map is that within the downtown plan area, we don't have parking requirements. So we have a lot of development immediately adjacent to downtown that was developed in a very similar pattern to much of downtown, but has parking requirements, and virtually all development occurring on existing buildings requires relief from the parking requirements. So this means that in order to change the use of most any existing buildings, some sort of parking relief mechanism is needed. And if this is something that can be done administratively, that is relatively simple. But if this is something that requires a special permit, that adds a minimum of 5 months to a project. So now we're going to get into just a couple of case studies. So examples of infill development. Some of this is new development. Some of this is adaptive reuse. So this first case is a case that you saw, this body, back in August of 2019. So this is located at 404 Arizona. This was a request for new construction on a vacant parcel north of I-10 in the Rio Grande area. It needed a special permit for setbacks and parking reductions. Now, as this map on the lower right portion of the screen demonstrates, what was being proposed here meets the character of its established neighborhood. So the request that you guys saw was for relief from the parking and setback requirements in order to secure development of that lot. And the parcels that are highlighted in the turquoise color have long been established. They're long part of the existing neighborhood, all built in a manner that encroaches into their current required setbacks per today's standards, and none of which provide parking on site. So in order to develop the parcel in white highlight in a manner that's in keeping with the rest of their established neighborhood, they were required to obtain a special permit. And this was approved by City Council in October of 2019. This is another case located at 710 Noble, so also north of I-10, but just a little further up. This is a case pertaining to the adaptive reuse of the existing building at that location. It is built to all of its required setbacks and does not provide parking on site. So again, we have parcels highlighted that are developed in the exact same manner as requested for the subject property, which again is requesting reuse of the existing building. And in order to in order to develop this building, they are going to require most likely a special permit. We're still in talks with the owners of this project, but they are going to need to request setback relief for 100% parking reduction and setback relief 100% and parking reduction 100% as well. And then this last slide shows a property that was able to receive legal nonconforming registration in order to reuse the existing building. So this is a property that's zoned M1, that's a light industrial district, and they were able to secure legal nonconforming registration for their existing setbacks. So even if you want to do a tenant improvement, you still need to take care of these issues prior to moving forward. And so again, we have the parcels highlighted that are developed in a similar manner to what's proposed for the subject property, but in order to be a part of their established neighborhood and to match the character of their surrounding development, we require them to go through some form of process. So just some takeaway points that we want to highlight for you, that it should be noted that all the case study projects that we just saw are the sort of development that is recommended and prioritized in Plan El Paso. This is the sort of development that we are wanting to encourage, and the neighborhoods in which these are encouraged. These are what Plan El Paso advocates that we replicate. And in order to allow for the reinvestment and adaptive reuse and infill development of our existing traditional neighborhoods, we are requiring zoning remedies for any sort of development. And in many cases, these are things that add months and thousands of dollars to project costs. So, and what this is effectively doing is it is penalizing areas that retain or replicate our historic growth patterns and those patterns that we encourage. So the issue here is that our existing zoning regulations do not match the sort of development that we have an adopted plan that says we are to be encouraging and prioritizing. So the issue here is our standards that were brought in after these neighborhoods were established do not allow them to continue essentially without some sort of mechanism which can be fairly lengthy to obtain. And with that, I am concluded in my presentation, and happy to entertain any thoughts, and otherwise I will turn it over to Nelson. Yes, Jeffrey.
And do you have a recommendation as to how to avoid the lengthy process, or suggestion as to how the rules might be changed in order to fix it?
We do have some ideas about changes that would help to alleviate the situation and allow things to occur by right that currently require relief.
Are you willing to reveal those to us?
I think when we flesh them out a little better, we can bring some back. Also, we need direction to get too far ahead on this.
Okay. And I think to go along with that, what Ann's basically getting to is right now our zoning code is out of date. And so you all gave a recommendation to City Council last year to encourage them for funding to rewrite the zoning code, which we did receive some funding to do, which we hopefully will kick off here in the coming months. So a lot of this will have to be addressed through a rewrite of our zoning code. There are many things that are dependent on each other, so as we address this, there are other things that we'll have to address, and so at the end of the day, we just need more of a 21st century zoning code instead of one that is out of date.
You know, about at the turn of the century, they had a building and zoning advisory committee here, which worked for 7 years. You know that? Just so you know. One of the ordinances, the sign ordinance, we met every other Thursday when Plan Commission didn't meet. And the sign ordinance we worked on for 10 months straight, all afternoon, Thursday afternoons, every other week. And it got presented to City Council, and there was a newly elected member to Council who said, I don't think there's anything wrong with the code just the way it is. So they voted not to even hear the thing. So if you're going to change the zoning code, be forewarned.
I'm going to reveal my ignorance here. I thought Plan El Paso created a kind of a new system of zoning, or at least designation of.
Our adopted zoning ordinance has been in place since 2007. So Plan El Paso was 2012. So it was about 5 years after the current zoning ordinance went into effect, and it hasn't been updated since Plan El Paso.
So Plan El Paso suggests a new zoning.
It contains recommendations that would lead that direction.
Okay.
Yeah, there are many suggestions in Plan El Paso, but at the end of the day, it is difficult to implement Plan El Paso unless it's codified.
There's a smart code.
Yeah.
Hi, Harrison Plord, lead long-range planner. I think maybe what you're thinking of is the future land use designations.
Right.
So those are applied across the city and outside of the city, and they are a detailed recommendation about what types of development should occur on certain properties, but they're not directly tied to zoning.
Right.
So we have some places where a certain future land use designation is in place, but it doesn't quite match the zoning there. And that's why sometimes you see amendments to the future land use map that go along with rezoning cases, and we kind of line things up. So that's the closest thing to zoning that Plan El Paso provides, but it's still just an advisory document.
So our job, besides making the recommendation that Plan El Paso's codified and that the zoning ordinances are updated is to tell developers and others that, hey, this will actually be good for you. Like you want to do an infill project, you want parking relief, work with us on this, you'll have a 5-day process versus a 5-month process. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That would be the goal. If we, as a city, are prioritizing certain types of development, then we need to align our codes to make that the easiest development to create.
You know, there's a series of recommended actions at the back of Plan El Paso, which I think only some of which have been addressed.
Yes. Yes, a big part of those recommendations involve code changes ultimately, because the plan only gives us so much power. Ultimately, what we are enforcing is what is codified. So until the codes really line up, we are always going to be fighting to really implement Plan El Paso.
Well, I think the thing to remember is the big picture is that it's a lot of moving parts to get those things done. It's not just you, staff, saying we want it, we're gonna. It's just not that simple. I mean, it's the staff, it's the public, it's the council. It's a lot of moving parts. So it's easy to say we need to. It takes, I know, a ton of work.
And no offense, it's not very sexy.
It's no, it's not sexy. And developers like yourself make it harder. Just kidding. No, but it's not as easy as just saying it needs to be done. We're going to do it. I mean, it's a ton of work, and takes time, a lot of time. So, in addition to what you guys have to do on a daily basis, it's a lot. So, whatever we can do to help, in my opinion.
Any other questions or comments?
No
Good.
thanks.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Nelson.
Thank you,
Thank
Ann.
you.
Nelson, what's your nickname?
Oh,
No
it's the
nicknames
stash.
for me.
Clark.
He has one, but it doesn't need to be public record.
Yes, no, please do not publicize it.
Don't get red over there, hot tamale.
All you have to do is say nickname and it's.
Yes, Nelson Ortiz, for the record. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'll be covering, obviously, the subdivision analysis portion of this presentation. So focusing in on plats that were recorded in 2019, there were several plats, a total of 70 recorded plats in 2019. When we start looking at the acreage that was platted, it was approximately 900 acres of platted property created, new property created in the past year. The majority of it being residential lots or residential acreage. It accounted for just over 50% of the land platted last year. There was a total of 2,977 single-family residential lots created just last year alone, with an average density of 6.2 dwelling units per acre, which is fairly low density compared to other cities. One thing to note about this is that the majority of the residential development that was platted was in the county and not within the city of El Paso. One other thing to point out from this that's very interesting and kind of ties back to a previous presentation, the amount of parkland that was actually dedicated compared to the amount of residential that was created is minimal, 2.6%. One of the reasons being is because a lot of these residential lots, again, are located in the county where they were outside of the path of annexation where parkland requirement is not required. But when we start calculating the differences and making comparisons, One thing that we lacked significantly were amenities last year. Again, 50%, just think about that. The other section, which is accounts for about 30% of the platted property, were multifamily developments. Street acreage is accounted in there as well. Stormwater ponds are also accounted. Some industrial uses. And then the commercial percentage, that's mainly general commercial uses, your typical suburban shopping centers and strip centers. Moving on to applications that were processed last year. There were a total of 72 subdivision applications that came before this body. Out of those 72 applications, 24% of those applications were seeking some sort of relief under Section 191005. You might remember, and many of you have voiced your opinions on this. Section 191005 deals with roadway participation policies. It's that policy that says 50% of lots within a quarter mile of the proposed development have already been developed and the existing street improvements are in character with the neighborhood. Again, 24% of those applications came before this body. This does not account for other exceptions that were sought, exceptions under 1948 that deal with hardship, exceptions and modifications dealing with previous applications and previous codes. Vested applications are not subject to this particular section. So again, these only are waivers pertaining to that section. There are 5 different types of reliefs that are sought under this section. The first one is right-of-way dedication. The second one is roadway improvements. Third is the hike and bike improvement. Fourth would be the sidewalk improvements. And finally, the fifth is the landscape parkway improvements. Similar to the presentation that Ms. Gallante made, this is a heat map that shows the general location of the areas in which these waivers were sought. This includes waivers granted within the past 5 years, between 2015 and 2019. You can see that they're distributed throughout the city, even some out in the county, but the majority of those requests are in the upper and lower valleys, more established areas, older areas, and areas that are also fairly rural in character. So within the last 5 years, there has again been a significant amount of waivers sought and improvements waived. When we try to put this into context, we made some calculations and we were able to conclude and calculate that approximately 75,000 square feet in right-of-way dedication was lost within the 5-year period. Approximately 24,000 linear feet in new roadway was lost. Approximately 17,500 linear feet in hike and bike improvements were missed out on. 18,796 linear feet in sidewalk. And finally, 30,584 linear feet in landscape parkway improvements were waived within that period.
I don't know how you get linear feet of landscape.
So the numbers that I gave you may not really mean anything, but in terms of hike and bike, improvements. Or I mentioned that approximately 17,000 linear feet in hike and bike improvements were waived. That's enough to cover a distance between here all the way to University Medical Center if we were to take the route from Texas through Alameda. This is the heat map that shows the general concentration of the waivers for hike and bike improvements. In terms of sidewalk improvements, that's enough sidewalk from City Hall all the way to Texas Tech. And the distribution and waivers requested. In terms of roadway, that's enough roadway following Texas, down Alameda, up Paisano, all the way from City Hall, this location all the way to Bassett Center. And again, the map. And in terms of landscape parkway, again, the most of the waivers, 30,584 linear feet. That's enough landscape parkway from City Hall all the way to the airport.
I think it's kind of important to note that some of these, I think, are, it sounds negative to have like missed out, but when it comes to sidewalks and some of those things, like some of these were things that made sense for residents in their neighborhoods. That was a positive thing. That there was a body willing to give a waiver so that you didn't have 30 feet of sidewalk and then trip on the beginning and trip on the end because it's the only 30 feet for 5 miles. So, I think there's some positivity behind some of these numbers too.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely
but they're still
right.
astounding, but
that's absolutely right. Sometimes the waivers do make perfect sense. Sometimes there's no reason for someone to have to construct a sidewalk that is, 50 feet long and only in front of the property. So you are absolutely right, and I was going to mention that later on.
Yeah.
You beat me
well,
to
the
it.
reason I mentioned that is over the last decade plus, having been on the real estate side, there were issues like that in the past that sorry.
Yeah.
And so you'll drive down certain streets and see sidewalk and and so it's nice to know that hopefully those types of things aren't happening as much anymore.
Yeah. It's whenever we present a waiver to you all, it's one of the things that you all have to weigh whether or not the waiver should be granted or not. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to grant the waiver. So I encourage all of you all to look at these waivers a little closer and have a larger discussion and weigh the requests because at some point we do need to start requiring improvements. And I know that a few of you have mentioned that. And so I would agree completely on that.
I have a question. Is TxDOT communicating better?
TxDOT is communicating with us. They are communicating better.
Yeah, that's the one that gives me the most angst is when they don't, and then it's someone, I don't want to say you because it's not your fault specifically, but, the customer ends up having to put in infrastructure that is just an absolute waste of money because it's about to get torn up or, for whatever reason. That's the one that really gets me.
Yeah, so it's in instances like those where the waivers perhaps would be, it's a good idea to waive, but then there's other instances where TxDOT doesn't have the project.
Right.
And it would be beneficial to get cyclists out of the road and onto the parkway. And again, this is the heat map showing the distribution and parkway waivers granted. Again, evenly distributed, large concentrations in older established areas.
So Nelson, as you slap our wrist for doing too many waivers, How many have we denied? What's the numbers on as far as denials? Is that coming up?
We did not focus on those.
That would make you look good, Rick.
I can,
just
if you all want the numbers, we can.
I'm just curious. I mean,
numbers.
I do feel like we make a concerted effort with these waivers to hear you guys out, to understand the issues. Like Sam said, does it reflect the rest of the community? Is it fair to this one homeowner or business owner to have to go through all these, hurdles? But at some point, yeah, we do have to put our foot down and say, well, that hike and bike trail's got to start somewhere. Someone's got to bite the bullet. So I was just curious if there's also, it'd be interesting to hear how many times we've said, no way, Jose.
I think that would be really interesting to know. I think we would all be surprised in the amount of waivers that are granted versus waivers that are often denied.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's something that we'll get back to you on, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just that we denied it, but what was the recommendation from, you guys?
Sure.
Not that I want to give you more work. It's the last thing I want to do.
We love work. In terms of right-of-way dedication that was waived, we put that in square footage, and almost 75,000 square feet of right-of-way dedication. That's enough to cover the parking lot across the street as well as the Hotel Indigo footprint. These don't happen as often as the actual improvements, and staff does, for lack of a better word, frown upon approving these because at least we want to secure the additional right-of-way in case the city has a project in the future. At least we'll have the right-of-way width so that we don't have to go and approach the property owners and try to buy it back from them. And you all are really good at also requiring them to at least provide the dedication. Maybe waive the improvements makes sense, but at least accept the dedication in case the city does come in the future and make improvements. So in total, within the last 5 years, if we were to put it in terms of costs to the city, that the city would then have to allocate towards those lost improvements, it's approximately $5 million in lost improvements that occurred. This is a higher number than, say, a cost that a developer would incur. Costs to the city are generally slightly higher, and this is an estimate, a rough estimate. So in conclusion, some takeaways from this. Again, about a quarter of subdivision application requests some sort of exception under section 19-1005. That is value and improvements waived. A lot of the times, not only does it equal money, but it also equals a loss in quality of life. A hike and bike is an amenity, a sidewalk is an amenity. Trees and the shade it provides, that's a loss in quality of life. Health as well. Hike and bike encourages cycling. And finally, aesthetics. One of our goals here at the city is trying to improve our city and the way that our city looks, and approximately 1,000 trees may have been lost, perhaps. So just something to think about there. One of our recommendations, key recommendation that we have is the creation of a fee in lieu program similar to the one that we have in place for parkland dedication. The specifics on that program would still have to be vetted, not only with staff, but obviously with the development community. And whether it's a fee in lieu program very similar to the park one, or whether it's some sort of buyout program or buyback program. That's all still kind of up in the air, but that is something moving forward that we would like to start working on, just so that, again, we can start securing these improvements in areas that are in dire need of reconstruction.
Does that have some legs? Is this something you guys are going to push for?
Yeah, this is something that we've been talking about quite a bit, and something that we do want to pursue, and hopefully we have your all's backing.
Depending on the price point, I think it's a great idea. Is this something other cities do that you're aware of?
So that would be part of the research that we would be doing if we were to get a go-ahead. We would obviously look at what other cities are doing. We would obviously set the appropriate price points that make sense, and take it from there.
At the end of the presentation, we'll come up with some recommendations for you to consider to pass on to City Council. If it was the wish of the commission, then we would pass along and recommend that City Council, I guess direct staff to look into those, such as this fee in lieu of program for the right-of-way improvements.
I have two questions. On that 24% of the subdivisions that there were roadway improvements for the exceptions, most of those are outside of the city limits or not?
No, actually. So the majority, I would say, lie within the city limits. Reasons why is because, again, these waivers are for streets that already exist.
Right.
So we often see these waivers and exception requests along Mesa, along streets within
Right.
the core.
By subdivisions, though, we're not talking about brand new.
No, we often don't see brand new subdivisions asking for these exceptions because developers do go ahead and build the street that's required. These are on existing perimeter streets.
And another question, does El Paso, is it on par with other cities as far as parkland dedication in acreage and fees? And do you all update that, or does it need to be updated?
So we don't focus I would say the Parks Department is the one that does or instigates the amendments to their parkland ordinance. Yes, it does fall within Title 19, but it's mainly those amendments are instigated by them. In terms of the actual research, it would be done by them. I have heard from other folks that, and I would agree with Gloria's comments that in terms of parkland dedication, the city of El Paso does have something unique in that other cities don't really require parkland dedication from developers. That's what I've heard, but again, in planning, we don't really do the research and look at other cities in terms of parkland dedication.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
That was very good. Thank you.
Nelson, that was that was great. Very, very, very detailed.
Thank you.
She said like 4 varies there. That's
Very, very,
that's
very,
impressive.
very, very detailed.
Stop it.
We have a lot. Yeah. That's standards. I mean,
It's interesting to hear that other cities don't require parkland dedication.
Okay, good afternoon again. In this last portion of the report, I'm going to tell you about some trends in land use and population growth here in El Paso that we think are relevant to the continued prosperity of our community. And these are things that it is important for anybody who has a stake in development or the city as a whole to be aware of at least and understand how they affect the way that we're going to grow and the way that the city is going to change moving forward. So I think we all hear on a pretty regular basis how El Paso is growing. It's something that's thrown around a lot. We're a growing community. There's buildings being built downtown. There's stuff happening on the east side. There's stuff going on all over the place. So we're a growing, prosperous community. And articles like this is from last year, are kind of contributing to that impression. And to their credit, this one is trying to quantify that in a way. And it's looking at census estimates for population growth. And it's showing about a 5% increase since the last decennial census in 2010.
In 8 years.
Yes. So the important thing to note about this is the dates. From 2010, when you look from 2010 to 2018, yes, it's 5% growth. But you have to consider that the U.S. Army conducted base realignment starting 2008, I think, and that process continued to bring thousands of troops to Fort Bliss and to El Paso up through 2012. That realignment ended in 2012. When we look at population growth in the 5-year period, beginning in 2013 and ending in 2017, El Paso is actually the 10th slowest growing city in the nation. And I don't want to imply or correlate population growth with prosperity directly, because you can have a stable population and still be prosperous. But it's just something to keep in mind when moving forward. So this chart shows 3 different population projections going out to 2030. The pink line is a projection that was included in Plan El Paso, and it predicted more or less growth continuing apace as it had been observed right around the 2010 census. And so with that prediction, the 2030 population for El Paso County would be about 1.25 million. The blue line is a later projection that was done by the Texas Demographic Center, though it does go out from the 2010 census again. And that's a more conservative estimate, getting us to 937,000 people by 2030. The red line here is actual census estimated population, their recorded estimates through 2018, and then a projection from 2019 out to 2030. And that's the most conservative of the 3, and that would get us to 913,000 people by 2030. So you can see on that red line, it's up to 2018, it's kind of wiggly, it's kind of flat, right? What we can say for sure is that since base realignment ended in 2012, our population growth has essentially been stagnant. We've had virtually no population growth. So you can see that on the blue line on this chart. And the other thing that I want to say with this chart is the pink line, which is showing our carrying capacity. That is the number of existing and permitted housing units that exist in El Paso County. So the 2010 number is the census estimate for housing units for El Paso County. You see it keeps going up. That represents new permits for housing that the city has issued. So it doesn't even include county units being built in the county. But the takeaway on this chart is that we have more housing than we have people to fill that housing. And as long as the population is not growing at the rate that we had previously been projecting, that gap's going to continue to grow.
I have a question, because
Sure.
I maybe like your insight on it, and this is like an age-old question in the real estate industry that everyone talks about on a regular basis. When you have absorption rates for sales, when you have absorption rates for not only single family, but single family rentals, absorption rates for multifamily rentals, apartment, et cetera, at incredibly high levels, all of them. When you look at this number,
It's not jogging.
Well, we want to figure out what the difference is.
It doesn't jive.
Yeah.
and I mean, there's some studies that I've seen that talked about the undocumented population in various parts of the country and what effect that actually has. And part of it, in being undocumented, is very difficult to quantify in some ways. But like, if you look at those two lines, and then you look at an apartment developer that like, I'll build 500 units all day, every day, as fast as I can get them done here at this point, you know? And so it's just really, you know.
What happens is they're taking it out of the center of the town and moving the population out to the edges.
But then you look at the absorption rates on rentals through the multiple listing service in 7990102, like in the city center, and there's not a lot available.
Well, and this is something that we need more.
It's so
we need more
interesting.
information from the industry on to help
It's
us
just
understand what's happening
something
here
doesn't
more.
make sense, and you don't see this in a lot of other markets. They're very tightly correlated. So it looks like, man, why would you pull so many permits? This is insane.
Right.
And then you go talk to a single family home builder and it's like, we sold 200 units this year. We only sold 80 last year. We can't keep them on the ground.
Well, and
so it's just unbelievable.
One of our theories has been, especially with regards to new units, that people really like new things. And so, to Jeffrey's point,
But that's
whatever's
when the
new is
rental-
going to sell faster.
But that's
and
when the rental data backs that up. To someone else moved into the old house when they moved to the new house.
We're also, another thing that goes into this, we're also very confused. We're looking for more information about vacancy rates.
Right.
Because the Census Bureau says that our residential vacancy rate is around 10%. We've seen wildly different estimates for what the vacancy rate is. And on our end, we don't know how those calculations are being made necessarily.
Right.
We can't dig into the data. But
You're saying
we want to
vacancy
explore this
like
more.
empty homes? When you say vacancy rate, are you referring to
Right.
homes sitting empty?
Or units.
Right, units that are not occupied by a household.
Well, to show you how much I pay attention, last year you gave this presentation and you said that there were 7,000 surplus. In 2018, there were, he gave his presentation last year, about 2018, that there were 7,000 surplus vacant homes that had been built. And it was astounding to
From
me.
what we could tell based on census data.
I'm still astounded by it, so it's effective presentation.
If our population is growing at less than 1% of the year, what's the natural birth versus death rate? It's higher than that.
Yes, it is.
Outflow.
Well, what's happening is almost all of our influx population is coming from is immigration. It's coming from other countries. Practically all of our outflow is from people who were born here, and they're moving someplace else in the U.S. And there are likely some people moving who were born here who are moving to Mexico as well.
And now, obviously, we have no inflow.
From the U.S., virtually nothing.
Immigration-wise, right?
From anywhere, if
There's no immigration.
Well, we have the immigration from Mexico, from Latin America, but it's not enough to offset the people who are leaving.
That's right.
It's just such a
Is there
mind-boggling thing.
It is.
You know, like
There's
the
a lot
Walmart
less than
test
there used to be.
in my mind, right? So
Yeah.
you build a new super Walmart a couple miles from another super Walmart, and overnight both super Walmarts are full. Super
Well,
Walmart
it's
A didn't lose any customers.
kind of getting off track a little bit, but
I understand.
it's the same
Well,
as
I mean, it's not off track.
it's
because
the
you
same
look-
thing that we're always telling
Yeah.
planners are always telling everybody about building highways and adding lanes to highways. As soon as you build them, they're going to be occupied with people.
Right,
It's induced demand. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
right.
Goldfish.
If it's there, people will use it.
Yeah. It's hard to
Except for El
reverse.
Paso.
Well,
Just
people
stay-
are buying new homes.
Just stay off my personal Loop 375 that I have.
And our,
Well, it's interesting, obviously, that there's a missing something.
Right.
Yeah, but at least you're,
So, yeah,
at
this is
least you're
just an
looking at
initial.
it, because 3
look.
years ago, we weren't looking at this.
Right.
So I thank you, because I think it is very pertinent, and, you know, it's hard, like the developers, I mean, they must have to really kill themselves to try to figure out if they should roll out more stuff or not, because it's hard to put all that information together. I mean, you really have to do,
This shows
you
that.
have to go to a lot of different places to get all the pieces put together to
Right.
really,
Well,
really,
and-
really
And there's
And
still,
at
get
this
an
point,
accurate.
we don't have access to all of those places ourselves. So we want to flesh this out more.
Yeah.
We want to explore this in a
No, but
deeper way.
it's pertinent, because then, you know, then I think what it'll help the planning department do is look forward to say, okay, you know,
Maybe some impact fees? Hello.
no.
Oh, sorry. That's not where you're
That'll
going.
get you
Buzzword.
pummeled. No, just to be able to look forward and say, okay, you know, how much activity are we gonna do, you know, maybe you can anticipate how much activity is coming or isn't gonna come, or at some point, you know, county-wise, we're gonna hit the wall.
Well,
And
and
the
not
county
only,
has a major problem.
not only
coming.
anticipating how much development is going to come, but how to manage it.
Right,
And so that's,
so it is very pertinent
That's the next part
information, yeah.
here.
Sorry, we're jumping ahead of you. That's what happens when you talk to real estate people.
Mm-hmm.
2017 to 2018, El Paso gained 213 people and had approximately 5,000 new units. Here.
that's what it says.
Yes. And again, that's city permits. Doesn't include what's going on in the county.
Right.
Maybe there's
Yeah.
some people living.
But the
in
population
town.
does. The population does include the
The
county.
county.
And the city is still growing at a faster rate than the county overall.
Okay.
So that's another thing sometimes you hear is, oh, Horizon, Socorro, they're
Yeah.
growing like crazy. According to the census, the city is still growing faster. So, in Plan El Paso, there is a part of the work that was done in putting together Plan El Paso was a development capacity analysis. It looked at land primarily in the city, but also in the city's ETJ in the county, and identified areas that were recommended to accommodate future growth, and figured out exactly how much land the city should be permitting on those recommended areas. And the conclusion that was arrived at through that analysis was that the land that was identified as recommended for development could accommodate 124% of the future growth through 2030. And again, that was based on a very, very optimistic population growth estimate. Here's this image again. This is just to show that, again, about half of the land that we are platting is for residential development, and we're not achieving the densities that were anticipated through that development capacity analysis in Plan El Paso. So in order to get to that 124% capacity on that land, Plan El Paso was considering all of its recommendations for how development should be managed in the future. So that includes things like high-density development downtown and in areas adjacent to downtown and along commercial corridors. The so-called missing middle housing, which is neighborhood-appropriate alternatives to single-family detached that are appropriate fit in with predominantly single-family neighborhoods, and also more thoughtful, complete new neighborhood designs when new neighborhoods are being developed. Things that aren't just single-family exclusive with commercial on the arterial corner. So on this map, the maroon shows the areas that Plan El Paso did recommend development take place in. You can see it is a majority of the city. It's a very large area. But two things to note here. There's very little land outside of the city that's included. Especially on the east side, it's mostly not recommended for development. Same with areas in the northwest, kind of north of Trans Mountain area. It's all not recommended for development until at least 2030, based on that development capacity analysis. This map shows residential permits that the city granted in 2019. And you can see here that most of them are on the edges. They're butting up against some of those areas where we have already stated that they are not recommended areas for development for another 10 years. And keep in mind, again, this is just city permits. It doesn't include everything that's happening in the county. As Nelson said, the majority of plats are occurring in the county at this point. So imagine many, many more dots on the east side, possibly in the northwest. So the takeaways from all of this. When we hear that El Paso is growing, it is in a way. It is growing physically, but it is not growing in population. And the analysis in Plan El Paso would suggest that the physical growth is not occurring in turn with the population growth. If we continue to see construction of housing in this way, in this pattern, in the pattern that we've been seeing for decades, the result is going to be increased infrastructure maintenance costs for the city as we continue to accept more dedications, more roads, more parks, everything. It's going to result in more expense for the city in delivering services to a larger geographic area. It's going to result in more traffic congestion. And if the population trends continue, then we're not going to get enough new tax revenue to pay for this stuff. And so that's the main takeaway out of this, and that's what these trends indicate to us. A big part of why we're not getting the development patterns that would allow us to meet those capacity possibilities for land is because of our outdated regulations. Because the recommendations that Plan El Paso makes for types of development are strongly discouraged by our codes, by the way that our codes are set up. So there are a few things that planning wants to do moving forward over the course of this year. One thing is to redo that development capacity analysis from Plan El Paso, taking into account a more conservative, a more realistic population projection. It's going to be a lot of work because we essentially have to create a land use inventory for the entire city. And there are a lot of details with how different zoning districts are regulated that are going to affect what they can hold. And we have to really dig in deep. It's something that we wanted to have for this presentation, but we just didn't have time. And the ultimate goal of that analysis would be to produce a tool that allows us to quickly evaluate regulation changes and how they would affect what is allowed where, and how much development we can accommodate on certain pieces of land. We would also like to continue, in Nelson's portion of the presentation, there was a discussion, there was a slide with the dollar amount for the waived infrastructure. That's a very rough number. That's why it was exactly 5 million. We want to really dig in and figure out what the city, one, is losing out on or is going to be responsible for when we allow those waivers, and also when we accept new infrastructure that even when developers are building it, we're still responsible for the maintenance costs forever. We want to do an analysis that will really dig in and figure out how much a new road costs the city over the long term, and determine what we are taking on as an economic entity when we accept these improvements and the responsibility for maintaining them.
I'm curious of one thing, when you're doing these analysis and looking forward to the future, do you meet with like the water utility and ask them kind of where, how they feel about all that growth? Because I know that they get a little itchy sometimes in certain areas of town because it's, they're not ready yet.
Yeah.
And I'm not being negative towards them. I just, we have a lot happening very quickly, and it's a lot, and that's a lot of infrastructure for them too, and
Sure.
it's a lot of cost.
Yeah. Well,
Which
and
falls
especially
back,
with
falls back on the consumer.
Right.
By the way.
Exactly. And that's ultimately all of this, if we're right, all of this ends up going back to the people who are paying taxes. And that's primarily property owners in this town. So eventually, people are already very upset about their taxes going up. We don't want to make it any worse than we have to. And if we can figure out what is happening trend-wise moving forward and do whatever we can to
mitigate
address it, yeah.
Right.
Then people aren't going to know they're grateful to us, but they're going to be grateful to us, saving them money. But yes, regarding El Paso Water, we would definitely have to include them because they're such a major landowner.
Well, yeah. Like the largest. Yeah. Although they've kind of rolled some of it out recently, so.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So more future tasks, not necessarily related to the trends topic. Kevin and Provi already told you about the upcoming changes to Title 2020 for the historic landmark language. We're also working on we're working with CID on some code amendments in Title 19 and Title 21, and you can look forward to seeing those sometime soon. And as Kevin mentioned earlier, this is some potential motion language that you may or may not choose to utilize. But I think the the City Plan Commission has the ability and the responsibility to provide their recommendations and their insight to City Council. If you all agree that these are worthwhile things to pursue, the fee in lieu program, as Nelson discussed, and a reiteration that the funding approved for planning documents would best go first toward a zoning code amendment process, potentially full rewrite, then we would really appreciate your support.
Okay. What is the money for planning documents? That's part of the city budget?
Yes.
So in December of last year, the city council approved some funds for various improvements, and there was a pot of money for what was termed planning documents. Some of it is for a zoning code rewrite. Some of it is other for CID purposes for some of the plans that they're doing. But the main one for us and the priority for us is obviously the Title 20 rewrite.
So moved.
So how do we properly recommend that we would like to recommend these so that you could move forward?
So as was mentioned, City Plan Commission is the recommending body to City Council regarding planning related matters. And so it is up to your discretion to make recommendations to City Council. And if that was so made, then staff would work on providing that message to City Council and say this is something that the City Plan Commission found worthwhile and that City Council should consider to direct staff to pursue X, Y, or Z.
Anything like the fee in lieu, would be a draft that would then be brought here and then forwarded to City Council?
Yeah, and that one would probably be some amendments to Title 19, the subdivision code, and so we would obviously run it, bring a draft for your consideration to give a recommendation then to City Council on the draft code amendments.
Madam Chair, would it be appropriate for me to make an amendment, make a motion for both of these items?
Yes, I think it is.
Well, I would like to do so.
Second.
You go.
Well, I move that we accept these two recommendations and send them to City Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks for letting us see you. Thanks for letting us see you. Thank you. Oh, God, I'm freezing. Okay.
Now you're trapped. I know. Yeah.
We don't have any other, there's nothing else we have to vote on, right? We don't have to have quorum?
There is nothing left to vote on. I think these last two presentations will be rather quick.
Okay.
They're just pretty minor
I'm asking
reminders.
for the sake of everyone else. I'm in it for the
No,
long
we're
haul.
we're gonna breeze through these
Okay,
last two.
okay. They're dropping like flies.
First of all, I feel like I, just have to make a statement on the record. I'm a little jealous that I don't have a nickname.
Oh.
Oh, you do?
I think it's a little unfair.
Oh.
Yeah, you actually
Yeah, I
do.
think I probably do, and I don't know.
Be careful what you ask for.
I'd like to thank you all and reiterate what Philip said and what Kevin said about the good work. I think, this 5 minutes is the most you hear from me all year, and it's because of the good job you all do, and especially staff. They really carry me. And so my presentation is on ethical obligations for CPC. And so I'm an attorney, and so I'm subject to ethical rules from the state bar. And I know many of you are in the real estate business and you have your own ethical codes. And so CPC in the city has its own ethical obligations. And as part of being an attorney, we have to go to a certain amount of continuing education every year on ethical issues. And actually this week I was at a conference and ethics was discussed. And one of the things they discussed was how we make ethical decisions, and we have them throughout the day. And there's small things that we don't even think about, but generally we make those from the gut. It's subconscious, and we just go through our day. The difference is with city plan commission or being an attorney or a realtor. You sometimes run into situations that are unusual, and your gut may not be enough, and so that's why we have these rules. So these are the 2 introduction paragraphs from the City Ethics Code, and I'm not going to read from them completely, but the first one says all city officers and employees have a fiduciary duty to the citizens of the city. And so what is a fiduciary duty? It's a higher duty, and it's to act for the benefits of the citizens. So, and you have a fiduciary duty to act for them and not for yourselves. In the end of the second paragraph, it says, unethical conduct is more than complying with state codes or any other codes. And the city strongly encourages all of its officers and employees to maintain the highest personal values and standards. And I would say that's kind of your gut feeling with day-to-day things. So why do we have ethical standards? To maintain and improve standards of public service, to improve public confidence in the integrity of city government. Government and like attorneys sometimes get a bad rap at all levels, so it's important that we adhere to these ethical standards and are as transparent as possible. It's also to avoid conflicts between the personal interest and the public responsibilities of city officers and employees. And so who is a city officer? You all are city officers. And so an officer means a member of the city council and any other member of a board appointed by the city council.
What about members of the city staff?
We are employees.
You're not officers?
No, so the 2 terms used are officers and employees.
Okay, thank you.
And no, you don't get a badge, Jeffrey.
I don't want to.
So these are more standards of conduct that are located in the city's ethical code. And I'm going to skip to the third one. Shall not give reasonable basis by their conduct for the impression that any person can improperly influence or unduly enjoy their favor in the performance of their official duties, or that they are unduly affected by the kinship, rank, position, or influence of any person. So Philip wanted me to talk about ex parte communication specifically in this presentation. And so in the ethics code, there isn't anything that directly references ex parte communication because, city councils, it applies to boards and city council. City council's a little different. They can hear from applicants, the public, lobbyists, but you all can't. And I would say that even though this doesn't say ex parte communication, that's what it's kind of meaning, to always, not be influenced, but not give off that impression. The other thing is, if you have an interest in anything before CPC, you need to disclose it, whether it's something you work for. A lot of you are in the industry, so it may come up where there's a project that you have an interest in, or you may have an ownership interest in something. And so it's just always better to disclose, and disclose early so we can look at it. If, if you have a disclosure and you tell us the day of, it's a little more difficult for staff and the city attorney's office to look at it. So on ex parte communication, this is where the CPC is different than City Council, and I think really any other board. And there's the these provisions that say no discussion shall be held by a member or members of this commission with applicant, appellant, or opposition who is attempting to influence any commission member concerning the application or the other matter involving an applicant or appellant before the commission. So you shouldn't be discussing CPC business outside of CPC. And recently there was kind of a question. It refers to applicants, appellants, and applications. So what about kind of policy decisions like that you have coming up? And I would say that's related to the language of or other matters involving an applicant or appellant, because those policies and decisions are going to affect applicants and appellants. So, and then there was kind of another question that came up, and it's regarding the PWSF ordinance, which you're going to be asked to look at next week, and whether lobbyists or people from the outside can discuss that with you, and they cannot. And one of the questions was, well, it hasn't been officially posted for CPC yet, so we could discuss it with them. And you can't. It's been directed by City Council for you all to look at that already.
Should I know what that acronym is?
It's about the cell towers.
Okay.
It's already come through once and it's coming back. And there's a lobbyist that is diligently trying to talk to any one of us. And he's been told numerous times that he cannot.
He knows if he looks at the video, he's not going to try to talk to me.
He should no longer be trying to talk to any of us because
The last
he's been
person. All right,
told
sorry.
numerous times that he can't.
So they can come and speak on the issue. They can speak at public comment at any time, but we shouldn't be discussing that outside of the meeting. So more on ex parte communication. In the legal context, it's usually an attorney communicating with a judge or someone else without the opposing party present. In the context of CPC, it's discussing official business outside of a public meeting. It can also be, there's an issue kind of with the Texas Open Meetings Act, and this can happen, before a meeting starts or after, if you're still discussing business and the meeting hasn't started or it's ended. The public doesn't have notice that a discussion's going on, and especially if there's a quorum present.
There's another example that happened before we got lucky enough to get you, and before Philip was back, where one of the members was getting the agenda and calling the applicants to give his input on how they should or shouldn't, and calling around to their engineers and the utilities and such, which is also a big no-no.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Wow.
Okay, yeah.
Get a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You
wouldn't even think, I wouldn't even think to do that.
This board it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And, I know you all spend a significant amount of time on it, but it's for the benefit of the public. It's not, to enrich yourselves. So here's kind of a quiz. You arrive at a regular CPC meeting and are approached by a fellow CPC member. He tells you that due to new information he has recently received from a neighborhood group he is a member of, opposing the rezoning for a nightclub near their home, he is going to vote no on the project that evening. He admits that although the public hearing hasn't been held yet, he has already made his decision, and he thinks you should vote no on the project too. What do you all think about that?
Negative.
Well, what are the issues you see?
Well, discussing it outside of the meeting, for one.
Colluding.
Yeah, colluding, making a decision before you hear the evidence, that's another.
Right, the information might not be accurate. Should the CPC member disclose that he's a member of that neighborhood group?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what about the CPC member going to his neighborhood group and hearing their opinion? Does he have to leave?
You know, I don't think it's an issue that he's at that meeting. He's a member of that group. I don't think he has to leave, but it might be something you need to disclose depending on the situation. Or you may want to disclose. And so kind of everything you all said, avoid private communications on matters before the board outside of official meetings. I think Commissioner Cummings had a term for this last year. The Fight Club rule. And so, in conclusion, as an officer of the city of El Paso, you have an obligation to comply with the city ethics code and any other code provisions, the bylaws, Open Meetings Act, things like that. And my recommendation is to inform staff of any conflicts or questions regarding perceived conflicts and avoid discussion of CPC outside of CPC.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for keeping us out of trouble. Yes. Sorry.
It's okay.
He thinks I have the coronavirus. I told him I was going to sneeze on him.
So what happens when you do a good deed, you lend some to your glasses and.
Uh-oh, better watch out.
Next thing you know, you're dead.
Well, just give them to me. Then they won't be contaminated.
So again, Kevin Smith with Planning Inspections for the record. The final item is just some reminders for the City Plan Commission, go over some of the duties and just some reminders about some of the trainings to keep tabs on. IT, if you can bring up the presentation. So again, our El Paso City Code, just the duty of the CPC. It shall be the duty of the City Plan Commission to formulate general plans and designs to promote the welfare, beauty, and comfort of the city. And the commission shall from time to time submit to the City Council reports, maps, and plans for such purposes. And that's from our City Code related to the City Plan Commission. Again, I'm sure you're all aware that regarding subdivision maps, you all are the sole and final authority regarding that, and all other agenda items, the zoning code amendments, plans, you are a recommending body to the City Council. So for the bylaws, and these are just some reminders, the presiding officer, they're the ones that are to ensure that there is strict order and decorum at all the meetings. And in order to convene a CPC meeting, and this is why ELSA, every time we have a meeting, asks if you're going to attend, is we have to have a minimum of 5 members for a quorum. So it's important to make sure that the business of the City Plan Commission is able to move forward. And in case a member of the CPC is absent for 3 consecutive meetings, it is our duty to report that fact to the one that appointed you. So just keep that in mind. And again, as Russell mentioned, if you have a substantial interest in a certain matter, talk to us beforehand so that we can determine if you have to recuse yourself from that item. For training requirements, and this is for all boards and committees of the city, state law requires that the 2 trainings, the Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act, that both those are held. You all should have already taken these 2 trainings. But also remember that we also require 2 additional training, ethics training and sexual harassment training. Once the state trainings have been completed, then there's a certificate and you provide that to ELSA. And then the city ethics training, that's available on the city attorney website. And for the sexual harassment training, that's offered on a monthly basis through the city, and ELSA can help arrange to get that scheduled.
So we have to do all those again, right?
You have to I believe every 3 years for the sexual harassment and the ethics training. So we can work with you all.
Can we figure out who?
We can work with you on an individual basis to determine if you need that
Oh,
training.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure I need
Yeah.
that.
And then, just for subcommittees, if a subcommittee was to be created, the bylaws establish the formation of those. Again, it's no less than 3, no more than 4 members, and then a quorum requires 2 members. And then, just some of the matters, that have had subcommittees created have been like zoning and subdivision and comprehensive plan related items. So those are just general reminders to you all. I don't think there's any action that's needed at this time, but we just wanted to all bring that for your information. So with that concludes this presentation. So
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Kevin, very much. Now we're done, right? Adjourn?
Before we do that, I would just say, like, you all kept coming up here and saying thank you to us, and really it should be the other way around.
Absolutely.
I agree with
You
that.
guys do a phenomenal job, and although there's some of us you probably like more than others, you truly do, and the whole city owes a debt of gratitude to each and every one of you, so I would like to thank you all.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Well,
before you can respond, move to adjourn.
no, on behalf of thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet with you all and to have this time to go over these matters. So thank you.
You make it so easy, it feels like we're not doing our job.
Well, that's because you're not.
That's why you have extra training.
Move
So-
to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Feel better.
I feel so informed. I normally get planted.
You know, that some large percentage, like about a third of the common colds are caused by